Okay, and so I guess hello everyone, welcome to the 2022 Lean in Higher Education Conference. Thanks for attending this session with us on doing stealth, lean by stealth, sorry. Employing stealth lean, sorry, that was the actual title. My name is Serena, okay, I'm one of the co-hosts for this session, okay, but before we start, as the host of the University of Melbourne, we acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work and learn. We pay respect to the elders, past and present, and the place of Indigenous knowledge in the academy. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation today. Okay, so bit of housekeeping. Okay, stay on mute during the presentation, but however, you can ask questions in chat. There will be a time at the end of the session to have a proper Q&A. But do feel free along the session to pop the questions into chat. Okay, so let me introduce your presenter for today, okay, who is Julie Knox from Marquette University. Thanks, Julie.
Hello, welcome. We made it to day 3. Welcome to day 3. And as I'm presenting on stealth lean, so why stealth lean? And I'm actually going to pose that question to you first. So if you guys could pop the poll question. My question back to you is, there were, I think, 3 simultaneous presentations. Why did you choose to come to listen to Stealth Lean? And as the poll's coming up, not really sure. The title intrigued me. My organization doesn't embrace lean. I got a lot of small scale improvement efforts and, well, really none of the above. And I promised to my fellow participants to write my reason why I'm here as a chat to everybody else. I'm seeing 22 responses and we've got 26 participants. So I think we're in pretty good shape. It's okay. My title captured you. That's brilliant. But also, we've got some folks who aren't using lean. There's others who are doing small scale. And then from the chat later, we will see some of the other reasons. Why am I doing, oops, I need to share results. I'm watching them populate and see all the answers come through, and I'm assuming that you can see it too. Do you see the poll results on your screens? Okay. So I will stop sharing that element. And why stealth lean? Lean's really been the cornerstone of my career. And going all the way back to my master's, and I got a master's in integrated manufacturing systems engineering. I had to stop and remember what my master's was in. And my thesis was, what are the success factors? Why are some companies successful engaging in it? Other people just aren't getting the results. And I'm going to send you back to the chat, because as I tell you a little bit more about my master's, I'm going to ask you to guess, what year did I do my master's in? And I was doing my master's in lean before we had the term lean even there. At the time, we were still sort of struggling to say what to call it. When I graduated with my master's, it was being termed world-class manufacturing. It was all about manufacturing. And we had 4 pillars. It was just in time. It was total productive maintenance. It was employee engagement. And there was a 4th pillar that was so far back that I can't even tell you what it was anymore. It's been wrapped into lean and change management. So I am going to ask you all to take a risk and put a year in there. When do you think I was finishing my thesis with those terminologies? And as you're putting your guesses in, it was 1992. I remember looking up when the term lean came into being, when it started showing up in the professional press. So if anybody knows that, where that term came from, and you want to put it in chat and share it with everybody, feel free. So in 1992, and I just did the math, that means I've been doing this for 30 years. And within this career, sometimes I'm working in an organization that's doing lean, but oftentimes I find myself in an organization that's not doing lean. Sometimes it's like this time to where I took the role despite the fact that they weren't doing lean and had no promises of doing lean when I took the job. Other times I was in an organization, we were working very hard to implement lean, and we had a leadership change or leadership direction, or most likely the financials didn't support it and we had to go a different direction. So stealth lean is that core or the heart of lean that I carry into my job, whether we are doing lean or not officially. It's how I integrate some of the concepts that I still keep holding true to, like flow, looking at the 8 ways, and respect for people, which oftentimes I emphasize as respect for our frontline employees. And I am going to share my screen. And so, as I put the presentation together, I was using the term stealth lean because if I use the word lean as I'm doing work, people, it doesn't get any traction in my organization. But from some of the presentations this week or these last couple of days, I might actually start replacing the word stealth with micro. I'm doing lean. I'm not saying it's lean, and they're also rather small engagements. Let's see if I can advance my thing. And the heart of the conversation today is really the framework I've been putting together as I've been using DocuSign as my hook to get some of the parts of the university to think about lean processes. And there's a couple of predecessors that have supported it, where it's 5W1H and a discovery process that comes out of Lean Sigma. And you all know that process improvement work has to start with your well-defined problem statement. If you were doing Six Sigma work and you were doing Six Sigma DMAIC, you would learn early on that half of your time is going to be in that defined stage. But my challenge has been, I have been in organizations where we didn't invest in that robust training of what makes a good problem. So we had a workforce who didn't have the skills to put together reasonably good problem definitions. And I was in an awkward position in a previous role to where my manager had been engaging pretty seriously with senior leadership to implement the ideas of Alan Robinson and Dean Schrader, who had published the books Ideas Are Free and The Idea-Driven Organization. They're very much, how do you harness and implement changes right from the front line? So on one hand, we were like, we want to pull all these wonderful ideas from our front line, but we're not going to invest any time in training them how to do a decent problem statement. And they had very good ideas that were hidden behind some very terribly stated problem statements. And at the time, my children were rather young, and I had, one thing I forgot to do. I don't think I am set up to share my system with you. Let me change that real quick. Audio settings. Oh, bummer. Let me. Share sound. There we are. We're over in the triple dots more. So let me try that video one more time. Now, did the audio come through at all, or did you just get to see the video run by? It did come through.
Ready, folks. Here it comes.
So with my frustration, I was looking for a simpler way to help employees come up with decent problem statements so their ideas could actually get acted on. And I leveraged this lovely little cartoon. Oh, I didn't want it there. And, 5W1H, who, what, when, where, why, how, is embedded in all the work we do. If you're working with pro-sci and communicating change, it's, you're starting with why. Why are we changing? What are the consequences? You're doing problem statements and problem analysis. You're oftentimes into the 5Ws. What I ended up pulling is we put together an intake form or a worksheet for if you were getting ready to suggest some improvements. We actually pulled out very specific questions to start guiding them towards what would make a good problem statement. Compared to what you will do for your problem statement training as you're bringing people into process improvement, this is much less than what you're doing, but it ended up being sort of the bare minimum for us to work with frontline, to coach them, and to also start getting leadership speaking of these terms as well. So that was one of the two foundational pieces. And the other one is a discovery process that I pulled from Ian Wedgwood's work. And he was a practitioner with Lean Sigma. He had been with Sigma Breakthrough at one point. And I pulled back into this work after I was at Marquette. And I'm working as a process improvement analyst inside of a project management office. And our project management office, when a project got funded, they were the folks who made sure it got implemented, and they were very good at implementing it. I was a bit of a front end that said, well, should we even do the project? Is it the right project to do? Should we implement this well? And as I was working with the team to get a better understanding of the process, identify if they truly had a series of potential projects, and is the proposed IT solution really the right starting point, I kept going back to Ian's process, which starts with a SIPOC, and it's a one-page, very simple SIPOC. And the intention is that we're leveraging the wisdom of the team. We don't have any data, but let's start leveraging the wisdom of the team to get a sense of what the project might be. And, you're right at the beginning of the project where people are coming in with preconceived notions of what the solution could be, where the problem lies, who we should blame for the problem. And he refers to this version of the SIPOC early on as that bright, shiny object to distract the team. As we're moving off of point zero and they're still venting and storming. So we start laying out what the process is, what it's supposed to deliver in a 1 hour conversation at most. From there, we move into a Murphy, what can go wrong, will go wrong analysis. And it starts with what was the intent of this process that we now have captured in a SIPOC, and that's that yellow dot in the middle. The blue squares around it was a brainstorm results that says, well, how does the process fail to deliver the purpose it was intended for? And then for each of those darker blue failure modes, it was well, why would that failure mode exist in our process? And as in any brainstorming session, there are way too many blue things to go after. And so the team will get them arranging it into your 4 square, your 4 block of arranging likelihood versus impact. And it's the wisdom of the team is usually pretty spot on to say, here are the 3 or 4 things that we really should go after. So in 2 sessions, how do we take them from ground zero, everyone's got their preconceived notions, to here are the things we want to work on in preparation to say, now should we really do this IT related implementation you were looking at? So those are 2 of my precursors that I had been working with. And then on came DocuSign, and we brought DocuSign in. Our Department of Financial Aid distinctly needed it because they needed parents of students to sign forms, and they needed to be the wet signatures that were like pen and ink, and they needed to be validated. And we had an enterprise license. So the organization, people in other offices saw like, ooh, e-signatures coming on. I get to leverage that, or I get to replace this bad PDF. I saw it, and I saw a business process opportunity. This was going to be my invitation to come into their process and challenge them and see how we could do it better. DocuSign became my hook to come into their office and look at opportunities. And as we've been doing DocuSign focused improvement efforts, this is the framework that has evolved over the projects. And I wish I could say that my 30 years of experience resulted in me coming into the first engagement with this framework pretty well sketched out. It went swimmingly well. But, like the 5W1H, this framework's emerged out of frustration. My first two engagements were tough. They were difficult. They went on for way too long, not enough results. And I was disappointed, mostly in myself, that how did we get so bogged down? It shouldn't be this hard. How do we start looking for things different? How do we approach it differently? So where the framework started emerging was in the middle. It was the SIPOC that came out of Ian Wedgwood's work and putting a swim lane in place. And this is one of the SIPOCs that we had done. And as the team, they had to be able to describe the process in no more than 5 process squares. They wanted to get down and tell me all the things that were broken, which meant they had to go way into the details. And it took an hour-long conversation oftentimes to pull them up into saying, describe your process in only 5 process steps from start to finish. And while they wanted to include the details and their problems, it didn't fit the form, but I certainly was paying attention. I was taking notes, things we need to look at later. But also their process blocks started progressing from, here's the things that I do, to what are the business steps? What are we delivering along the way? So we helped them work amongst themselves to actually define what their process was. What does their process deliver? What are the outputs of the completed process? And who are the customers of those completed processes? Which, who are my customers? Then quickly translated into who are the stakeholders of this project. As we get ready to go live, who do we need to check in with to make sure that we've got an acceptable solution? And what are the outputs? Those are going to be a lot of my deliverables coming out of this project. The dark orange was not because it was Halloween and fall. Those were where we still had gaps. We found some policy inconsistencies. Our policy said that we were going to hold on to this form for 7 years. The reality is every 2 years it got replaced and the old one was thrown away. So we just simply used color to show where our biggest issues were. So with the SIPOC, we were defining what does my process deliver and why do we even worry about it? And then the swim lane is going to be our handoffs. And this one, in the process of defining the process squares and getting all the way to the end, we discovered that we had a process that was failing already. And it was going to fail even worse when we moved into DocuSign. We used this swim lane and put those big gray blocks on to say, here are the macro steps, and then used pink to start pointing their direction of why it was going to fail if we were going to keep doing it. The nice thing is those forms no longer exist. We still need to do that feature, but we found a way to move it into our student information system. And if I had a magic wand, I just made it go poof, they're gone. But for the forms that went forward, these 2 documents became the map as we designed the template. What are we developing and what are the handoffs along the way? So they were necessary, but they weren't sufficient. So they were 4 and 5. The portfolio analysis became my turning point. Those first couple projects are like, oh, somebody is finally listening. Let me tell you, let me share with you my big, ugly process that's just driving us crazy. And I must tell you that this swim lane that's along the top was the top 2 rows of probably a 6-lane swim lane that we were exploring early on to say, where does DocuSign fit into all of this? Or the one that has all the diamonds had a lot of them. Well, in this case, go here. If not that, go here. We were delving into processes that didn't fit DocuSign whatsoever. And after those first two engagements, my third engagement was with our finance office and our comptroller's office. And we had the conversation of what makes a good first project. And it was lovely. They listened to me. And with just an informal conversation, they had some big hairy stuff they wanted to get into, but we made our first template with them, nothing more than the employee confidentiality agreement when they became a new employee, or they moved into a finance role, or when they had signing approval on an account. This was enough for them to understand the basics of DocuSign, what it does and doesn't do. And it prepared them to move into more complex forms right after this. But it also let us put a couple forms into production quickly so they could start realizing benefits, and they could start saving time so they can invest it into the more difficult ones. This other one, which is the life of a doctoral student shown in the sequence of paper forms they're going to fill out. That one was also a portfolio analysis, and it was not that easy 1 hour conversation, and I had them focused on the easy ones. We ended up talking through each one of those forms, and this is a screenshot of PowerPoint slides to where I gave them an image of the form that we had been looking at, and you'll notice they all look a lot the same. Couple key points, and then my recommendation, and some of them I was rather emphatic with. And thankfully, we have yet to even try that top row, but we ended up with a sequence that said, here are the forms that we can successfully cascade into DocuSign. So that was my portfolio, making sure we had a couple manageable one. So we've got the side pack, the swim lane. We're starting with some easier forms to get the learning going. The other one came out, it's another one I had to remember to include from the hard way, is setting that North Star. One of my early teams just kept improving and polishing, wasn't quite ready, couldn't move it in production. Just one more thing. What about this? Have we thought about this? And what I didn't have was a hook to pull them out of there and say, it's good enough. You've made significant improvements over what you have today. Let's put this into production and move on to your next form and come back to this later in the idea of continuous improvement. So now, before we start working on the DocuSign, I might do it with the team, or if their leadership of the organization isn't there, we'll have the leadership come in and we'll start talking, what is the one biggest pain point you have on this form? And staying and trying, keeping them in high level, is it accuracy? Is it the fact that it needs to be easier to fill out and we're making a lot of errors because we've got staff that's changing over? This was one of my finance people. It certainly does not look like a North Star. It looks more like a constellation. There's a lot more words there. I was okay on letting them keep all those words because truly they did tell me what their biggest pain point. It's just taken too much time, and it's the manual tracking, it's the following up, and how are we filing that copy on file. They also gave me a second pain point. Nice, we can focus on it, but what it gave us was, once we have that first thing resolved and good enough, it moved into production. We've come back and we've improved it 2 times since, but at least this form was up in production within weeks rather than the way too many months that my other team that kept polishing spent. So predefining what's going to be good enough to move it into production. And this one, which is PSAM, which unless you are working in DocuSign, you're like, what's that term? Is it Japanese? No, this one's not a lean Japanese term. This one is just a moniker that comes out of DocuSign, and it's prepare, sign, act, and manage. And what DocuSign is encouraging you to do is remind yourself, it's not about the form, it's the business process. What is the business process where this form is used? What does it take to prepare, meaning what's the trigger to use the form? Where's the data come from? Who's providing it to you? Signing is I'm engaging with the form and I'm completing it. You know, it could be one people, it could be a complex workflow, but the actual process of filling out the form falls under sign. Once that form is done and submitted, what do we do with it? What action does it trigger? And manages that long-term, you know, is this long-term retention that needs to be there for audit? Is it a document that needs to be readily accessible because we refer to it? You know, what's our long-term management of the signed document? And this was one where in all my engagements, we talk about it being, it's about the process, it's not the form. And I fell right into it. We had swim laned it. And this was, I need to request a new financial account. And that was the first set of forms. The second form was, once the form was set up, who's authorized to use it? What data can they see? And we were engaging in, how do we replicate this form and make it work in DocuSign? And it was my boss who pulled me back and he's like, Julie, the process is not defining who has access to the account. The process is, I need a new account and I need to be able to use it. So with that, you know, refocus, remembering that it's really about the business process, not the form, we pulled all the information up into the first set. And instead of having a process flow that circles back on itself, I tell you everything I need on the initial form and it flows on out. And the last step is, you know, clarifying what is being authorized and why. You know, I nearly every time I ask them, and what would it take for us to eliminate this form? I've only gotten one group to grab on that one yet, and that's because we were able to show that the form was impossible the way it was written. How many approvers can we approve? Can we remove? And are some of those approvers only required in some circumstances? And you know, part of it is because DocuSign's got some really nice tools that we could leverage to better focus the person on what we're asking them to do. But, you know, in higher education in North America, and I'm going to assume it's common globally, is there's way too much bureaucracy. You know, the number of signatures. In fact, Eric might be on the phone call. He actually shared I called it a paper, he called it a memo. He had done as he was a department chair, he actually was keeping track of how many times he was signing forms. You know, because it was annoying him. He recognized that we had way too much bureaucracy, and he had enough data that his Lean Six Sigma class would actually do an analysis on it. And what I've got here, let me bring up my Zoom a moment, is the things that have been driving me crazy with our forms. This top one is, we'll have this 3-line statement that I agree to blah, 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 and it's all directed to the student. Immediately after, we ask for the department chair and the graduate school to sign off with no statement of what they're signing. What are they agreeing to? Or are they just witnesses? The next one's even worse. You know, they did take the point of putting out, you know, 3 bullet points of what is being signed. The first one isn't even possible to happen. The third one's irrelevant. And the second one, So we've got really bad statements of why we're signing, but then we have 2 people signing it. It's the advisor and the department chair. As I am pushing and challenging them to say exactly what, and once I have a relationship with the departments, I'll get a little cheeky, like in this form. Their signature block originally looked like this. As we were putting it in a DocuSign, I put those highlighted statements in there, and exactly what is the student agreeing to? Try as I could not get this extra signature off. Partly is that our forms today, when they were PDF, came through with so many errors. Now, with doing DocuSign or any other intelligent form, we've locked down a lot of things, so the errors aren't going to be happening. So as we were developing it, they still don't have trust that they're going to see good data come through. My expectation is that within a year, our DGSs are going to say, yeah, enough of these forms. Please take me off of them. And I'm hoping right behind it's going to come the program, but I am doing everything I can to put it as close into their face as possible, saying, and why are you signing this? Do you really need to? So that's the framework I'm following. And, I'm hitting the project owners with this as I'm coming into their area to help them with DocuSign. And so I've got 3 quick slides of what it looks like. I give them sort of a quick electronic workbook, which has, how do you sign into DocuSign? Here's some links to some videos for early starts. Here's some samples. And I threw 4 slides in about business process. Here's the 6 steps. And oh, by the way, after we work through these 6, then we'll start about, can we do it in DocuSign? And they've got a reduced version of the 6 steps. The first 3 are a planning step. And then the other part is mapping the process. So that is how I am doing Stealth Lean. And I'm going to try something different. I'm going to see if I can find, I had a whiteboard option. Let me, first I'm going to stop my sharing. Then I'm going to share a whiteboard. And do you all see a whiteboard? And I did have, my editing was a little too much. What will you do to try Stealth Lean? Or how might you apply Stealth Lean? And what I'm going to invite you to do is, if you come over to the left, there are sticky notes that you can grab and start entering. How might you try some Stealth Lean? And Serena, as people are starting to think about how they might use Stealth Lean, do we have anything in the chat that we should talk about?
Yes, we have Jess guessed the correct year for your PhD, 1992. So well done, Jess. And there was a little bit of debate going on about when your question around when Lean actually started becoming a bit more popularized. Dates range from 1995, 1919, 1988, a John Prafsic article called Triumph on the Lean Production System. That's what Linda suggested, or Womack and Jones in 1996. So there's a couple of discussions there about when Lean started being used, and I guess in more popular. Okay. And no specific questions, but I guess there was a little discussion, a comment from Michelle about how common the many layers of bureaucracy there are in many processes, and Linda said yes, it's quite common, and it's often the primary reason for the lack of process flow. Okay. So
yes,
a couple of comments.
Going back to my early days in manufacturing, oftentimes when we had a quality problem, we would put an extra step onto the process so that we would catch it so it wouldn't happen again. And I'm thinking that the extra signatures that we have in higher ed might be similar to that. And I was doing a value stream mapping with an organization, and their final product was rather large and it was expensive to ship it. And the customer was the person who paid for the shipping. So as we were going through the value stream mapping, I think there were at least 4 people in the process who actually verified what the shipping charges were going to be and updated them, because customers had gotten surprised and there were complaints. So they took that extra step to help and improve the data. This was at a time when our fuel charges were high. So all of our shipping was estimates anyway, and there were surcharges. So any data we put into the process was errant to begin with. But because we had customers multiple times complain about the surprising cost of shipping, people added that extra step to take care of the customer. They did it with good intention. But we ended up with this very bloated one because of problems. And I'm thinking that something went wrong. We had one where a student graduated and the audit had failed, and we realized the person actually hadn't earned the degree. So you can imagine how many extra signatures ended on those processes for a while. But yes. And let's see. Where are we as far as time and any questions? And if anyone wants to unmute themselves, they're very welcome to.
We've got about 10 minutes left.
Now I'm looking, my view of the whiteboard is, I'm assuming each person has control that you can zoom out and pan so you can get a good view. Good. Because I actually had a very unattractive view and I couldn't see much. I'm glad you did better. So some of the suggestions, tone down the Japanese terminology, use things. I use the words around improvement rather than lean. Robotic process automation offering as a gateway drug to process improvement. Okay, so while I'm using DocuSign as my hook, it looks like somebody else is doing robotic processing to sort of serve that same purpose. Or they're saying that we're relying on it too often. So I'm not sure if that's a positive or a negative bullet point there.
That was me, Julie. I was saying, like, people aren't often interested in us coming in, like you're saying, nice to have. But people like cool, shiny new things, and they want one. So people come and knock on the door when they think they're going to get a bot, and we say, yeah, bot. Okay, let's start from the start. And they sometimes get one, they sometimes don't, but it gets them in the door.
It gets them in the door. That's the most important part. All right. When a system is going to be implemented, has been agreed to without looking at underlying problems first. Oh, yes, we have plenty of those.
Yeah, so that was me, Julie, Michelle here, sort of building on the cool, shiny new things. Oh, fabulous. We've got this great new system. It's going to make all the difference to everything, but they haven't really thought about the underlying bits underneath it. It's, we must keep up and get the system, but no one's actually looked at the underlying requirements. So that's a bit of a stealth moment as well, I reckon.
Yes. Enhancements to existing systems. Just having a value conversation is a way to practice stealth lean. Simply not refer to them being lean, just frame exercises making discovery. I do like that term, discovery. And looking for small, quick improvement wins to bring people along and see the value. And I'm assuming your university is similar to ours. We've got people who are working in positions where they came from outside of higher ed, and they come with the problem-solving methodology, or they come with lean terminology or another moniker. We also have staff who I think started their careers at the university and they were about 10 years old, and they're still here 40 years later. And they haven't been exposed to any of this outside of the university. And so unless my organization has really gone down the road of we're doing lean and here's our vocabulary as it makes sense, it's so easy to fall into jargon that just doesn't resonate. Anything else? If anybody else wants to unmute or share anything or pose a question.
I'll make a comment, Julie. So I initially came from not in higher education. I came from public service, actually, where I was put in under the team of innovation. Okay, so I was meant to be improve and making the public service a bit more innovative. And it's similarly, I ran into a lot of resistance around the term innovation, because we don't need to change innovations too fancy a word. So this is where I did change the language a little bit to just making things easier for people. Okay, making, it is about them around the improvement rather than innovation. And I think it kind of falls part and parcel into all these improvement methodologies that we have, whether or not it's innovation, design thinking, or things like that. We get rid of some of that language and make it more, and a couple of people I mentioned as well, make it more accessible to the people that we're trying to help.
True. Because at the end of the day, we're not trying to do lean. We're trying to make improvements and improve our day-to-day work and deliver better for our customers.
Yes, exactly.
Some of you I do recognize that I think you were with me at this time yesterday and you're back again. And when we were first putting in potential ideas for conversations, I pitched both of these ideas thinking well, one of them will grab. So this was really meant to be two flavors on the same presentation. One was the pilot mentality or doing stealth lean. I wasn't expecting to do both presentations. And so the fact that you're at both, I'm hoping that they were different enough that there was value in both of them.
Yes, I mean, I was at your session yesterday as well, Julie. So yes, I did find there's very, very different take on both, So yes, I did learn a lot, I guess, in both. Okay.
Excellent.
Anyone else have any particular questions or comments? I see Linda agrees.
So Julie, I just want to say it was very enjoyable for me to sort of see you present material. It occurred to me that over the years, we really haven't had a chance to sort of maybe share screen or sort of get a little bit of insight into, how we do certain things and whatnot. So it's nice to see the sort of the structure and the methodology and some of the things that you've derived. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. And for in the Americas, Ruth has been hosting a bi-weekly coffee chat. So for 30 minutes, anyone from around the Americas, we sort of get together and talk one topic for 30 minutes, share ideas, and then we're off and we talk again in 2 weeks. So Eric and I have had many conversations together, but without any screen sharing or formal presentations.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I think we're coming to the time of this particular session. Okay, so once again, thank you very much, Julie. Very informative session today. Okay, I hope to see you all at, I guess, the upcoming sessions for the rest of the day.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.